Hello, everyone. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. You remember the Inflation Reduction Act, how it spent money that we don't have and supposedly reduced inflation? Well, one of the parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically the Green New Deal, it gives subsidies to companies who basically create cars on batteries, electric cars, wind turbines, give subsidies, also known as giving them money. Okay. Um, so in a free market, one might think, okay, if you are selling something that's better and cheaper, wouldn't the free market buy it? Right? If I'm offering you a product that is at least the same or better for a cheaper cost, i.e., energy, wouldn't you buy it? The answer is yes. It would sell. Um, but green energy doesn't sell. There's a reason for it because it definitely ain't better and it ain't cheaper either. And it's not reliable. So that's why it's not selling. So the government's going to buy it for you with your own taxpayer dollars and subsidize it. But this doesn't just have an effect on the United States, it has a ripple effect in Europe. So let's take a look at this article here from Politico. It says subsidy war because what happens when one country says, "Hey, we'll give you money if you make your vehicles here, or if you make your chips here, or your wind turbines." What happens? Well, they move because they can make more money, or at least spend less because the government's giving out subsidies. And this can go over the Atlantic too. You know, people can come over here from overseas. It's not just state to state. But the problem with this competition is the United States has the world reserve currency, the EU does not, and either any way you slice it, they don't have the money. Neither does the United States to start handing out unprofitable subsidies to these companies. What I mean unprofitable, it actually doesn't make these companies don't make money because it's not better and cheaper. Okay, innovation. If it's better and cheaper, people will buy it. And yet, these politicians are on the warpath because they think the sun monster is going to eat us. And there's different schools of thought on that, but is it an existential threat more than the energy crisis? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. But let's read here. The EU is in emergency mode and readying a big subsidy push to prevent European industry from being wiped out by American rivals. Two senior EU officials told Politico, meaning they'll leave Europe, leave with their jobs, leave with their industry. Further reading, Europe is facing a double hammer blow from the US. If it weren't enough that the energy prices look set to be remaining permanently far higher than those in the US, and why is that? Thanks to Russia's war in Ukraine. There's more to the story than that. Uh, European sanctions, European reliance, European shutting off its own power sources. The U.S. President Joe Biden also currently rolling out a 369 billion industrial subsidy scheme to support green industries under the Inflation Reduction Act. That should be a sentence in the Onion, right? Inflation Reduction Act rolling out $369 billion. It's just so stupid. Um, no one liked the marketing of the Green New Deal, so and everyone hates inflation, so we'll just change the name and everyone will be happy with it. It's yeah. Further reading, the EU officials fear that business will now face almost irresistible pressure to shift their new investments to the US rather than Europe, of course. And this will hurt Europe far more than it hurts America because, again, we have the world reserve currency, aka we can print energy because energy is settled in dollars, and the EU can't. They have to sell the euro to get the dollar to buy energy and a bunch of other things. So we're in the power seat when it comes to spending money that we don't have. EU industry chief Terry Brenton is warning that Biden's new subsidy package poses an existential challenge to the European economy. The tentative solution now being prepared by Brussels is to counter the U.S. subsidies with an EU fund of its own. tensions are mounting around the world, people. When it comes to, um, you've probably noticed, countries are starting to look out for themselves because they can't be friends around the world and keep their voters happy, because helping around the world is causing inflation in their own country, right? And now there's this subsidy competition. So they're coming out with this European sovereignty fund to pay companies. Yet another boondoggle. You know how the government watches over closely how money is spent. They definitely watch over closely how much money they bring in. They don't watch too closely about how they spend it. Senior officials said that the EU had to act extremely quickly as companies are already making decisions on where to build their future factories, from everything from batteries to electric cars to wind turbines and microchips. Again, if these people, and I get like a tax cut, but business owners come to a country that is good for business. And when you create a false incentive, let's say I want to sell solar panels, and I get into the industry and I realize that the cost of a solar panel, or take an electric vehicle, yes, you save on gas, you still have to plug that thing in, so it does use energy. Where's that energy coming from? So you plug that thing in, that costs money, and the vehicle itself cost $70 to $100,000. So how am I going to get people to buy into this without a subsidy? I wouldn't. So that car would never make it to market. Not until that vehicle is in the $25,000, $35,000 range would people even think about buying it, because it actually saves them money. But today, you just have government spending your money for you, printing it, and stealing it through inflation. So further reading here, the chaotic response to gas price crisis, where the EU countries reacted with all sorts of national support measures that threatened to undermine the single market, is still a sore point for Brussels. Translation: they want to have a unified front. They don't want Italy pitting themselves against Germany, where Italy's saying, hey, we want more industry here, so we're going to give more subsidies to you, and then Germany kind of undercuts them. They want a unified response, and they didn't have a unified response for gas prices, which is an interesting point, because I was reading the other day. Let me show you this other article here. The EU was working on a kind of a unified price on gas, and they didn't come to an agreement, which is rather interesting. So the EU doesn't want one country benefiting from this energy crisis, right? So one country could get supplies because they have more money, or get more energy because they have more money, and so they want a unified response. And how are they going to do that? Well, they had this meeting, and it says here, plans to introduce price caps on natural gas prices have hit a dead end after EU energy ministers on Thursday failed to reach an agreement amid deep division. This goes back to people are having trouble lowering inflation in their country and being unified, like, because you have to make sacrifices here. So they're trying to do things like subsidize the war in Ukraine and lower inflation. Two things that aren't synonymous with each other. They're trying to not help Russia, but also not freeze to death. And so there's this dichotomy there, and people are getting pissed in Europe. Voters are. So the Czech industry minister, Josef Sikala, probably mispronounced that, has, however, said that the ministers did manage to agree on other important measures, including joint gas purchases, this is for the EU, supply solidarity in times of need, and expediting the authorization process of renewable energy. What got us into this mess with Europe when it comes to the energy crisis? It was this green energy push. Again, if it's better and cheaper, people will buy it, but it's not reliable. And so these leaders did things like start importing and being over-reliant on Russia, turning off their own energy supplies. And that's what got us into this place, because they wanted green energy. And unfortunately, the wind doesn't blow all the time, and the sun doesn't shine all the time. And so they're doubling down on the green energy thing with money they don't have. Earlier this week, the European Commission issued a statement where it declared what it called a safety price ceiling for gas prices, set at €275 or $283 per megawatt hour. Industry in Europe is suffering because if your energy bill quadruples, what does that do to your prices? If it 10x's, people probably won't even buy yours. If it's a want that you're selling, people aren't going to buy it. And so these businesses are shutting down. According to Brussels think tank, since September 2021, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain, four of the largest EU economies, have each spent 20 to 30 billion to artificially lower gas prices with subsidies. So what does that mean? If they do not lower demand, they do not increase supply, they actually increase demand, and they lower supply. However, these subsidies are viewed as less than ideal since they help fund Moscow by driving up the price of natural gas because it's set internationally, and drain public finances and harm the environment. So back to what I was talking about earlier. How are these subsidies for green energy not going to drain the public coffers? Does it actually help grow an economy if a company who is not profitable, and people don't want their product because the prices are too high because they cannot create it and be profitable and have people buy it, for the government to just take taxpayer dollars and shove it into their hand and say, make it, and we'll lower the price by making up the difference with taxpayer funds? Does that actually help the economy? No. So it's short-term thinking, and only companies with a printer are able to do this. And so it's short-term. It's short-term. It might get you reelected because the companies stay in Europe, but long-term it destroys your currency because you're printing your currency to give to an unprofitable company to sell things that people don't want to buy. It's not cosmic. The cracks in the EU, I think, are starting to form. It might take years to play out, but how much unity will you have if people have to sacrifice in one country, so in another country who maybe mismanages their finances, right? Who potentially mismanages their finances, mismanages their energy policy, but you have to suffer in your country so they don't freeze to death in the winter because of their own stupid decisions. Human beings typically don't like that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. See you guys in the next one. Peace.